Hunt. This is the Power of Hope Devotional. Welcome back. 5 minutes, 5 minutes to transform your life, 5 minutes to give you something to think about, something biblical to consider. So I always timidly ask you a question. Typically, I ask you a question. So I want to ask you, what is the cost of being a disciple? What is the cost of being a disciple? And it's interesting because when I think about it here, I'm looking at the scripture here actually on my phone. And it says here that in Luke chapter 14:25, Luke chapter 14:25, it says, a large crowd was following Jesus. And he turned around and said to them, if you want to be my disciple, you must by comparison hate everyone else. Your father, your mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, even your own life. Listen, by comparison, you got to hate your mom, your father, your brothers, your sisters, even your own life, man. That's the cost. That's the level that he's looking for. He says, otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. What's the cost of disciple? It's everything. Goes on further. It says, but don't begin until you count the cost. Now, he goes into an example of this. And this is the beautiful part. I love this example. It says, for who will begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? See, that's part of it. If you start a building and you're constructing a building, who would start a building without looking to see what the ultimate cost would be to, in fact, build a building? And it says, otherwise, would you begin the construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money. And then everyone would laugh at you. Why? Because you're a laughing stock. Why? Because you didn't count the cost, right? You did not count the cost. You didn't count the cost of what it would take. It did not count the cost of what it would take to build a building. And see, he was using this as an example of discipleship. That before you run so fast and say, I'm a disciple of Christ, I want to follow Christ, I want to be a Christian, but I want to be disciplined. I want to be a disciplined one. That's what a disciple is. And if you're disciplined with some accountability. See, most of the problem is that most Christians don't want accountability. They don't want to be disciplined. They don't want to have discipline and account or speak up for their own time. So most Christians just want to loosely serve God, but they want no accountability for what they're doing. He's saying, listen, if that's the case, then you don't need to be my disciple because you're not willing to count the cost. And then there's another one said, oh, what about a king that will go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against them. So you gotta go to people that are your officers. You got to go to those that are fighting with you and look and see, can we find or devise a way to counteract the 20,000 and we just have 10,000? In other words, you need to stay you're behind home. In other words, don't go trying to fight somebody you don't have enough people. And so it says, if he can't, he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. If you can't deal with the enemy, then it's time for you to send a delegation and basically get some compromise for peace if you can't overtake them. So then he wraps this all up and says, so you cannot be my disciple without giving up everything you own. Wow. He said everything. Can you say that? Everything. To be his disciple, you have to give up everything. Everything you own. It says salt is good for seasoning, but as it loses flavor, what do you make it salty again? Why go there? Because that's what really causes you to really make a difference in the world. If that you have some preservative, you have something there that's will be left to help preserve others. But if you walk away and you think it's easy, this is not going to be an easy path. So look, understand this, that God himself is saying to you, the cost of discipleship is everything. The cost of discipleship is you have to understand it costs you everything. But listen to this. But when you gain a discipleship with Jesus, you have eternity. Everything on earth may be lost, but eternity with God will be your reward. This is Bishop Garland Hunt. This is the Power of Hope Devotional. I'll talk to you next time.